All right, everybody. Welcome to World Cup Reactions video series. I'm going to be doing I'm going to be doing one of these videos, and eventually this is probably going to turn into a weekly record for UEFA soccer when for UEFA football when that starts back up, where I'm going to review the Champions League and local leagues, maybe with a friend or maybe by myself. We'll see how that goes. First thing, welcome everybody. We have just wrapped up a wonderful group play round at the World Cup. First things first, I wanted to touch on something that I'm a little sad about. So here's the context. Last night on LinkedIn, I saw a post from somebody who, serves on multiple boards and organizations, was a computer science student and an immigrant from Peru, and he lives out in Palo Alto, California. So great kid. Now, he was at three World Cup matches. When I saw that, I sent this to a mentor and very close friend of mine offline, and I'm like, how do people like this afford to go to things like that? And she basically put it very bluntly, because I almost led into this by saying, I'm not comparing myself, I'm actually asking a realistic question. She's like, he has money. So whether that was he saved the money up from things that he's done in consulting or he had family assistance, this is how it's possible because the cheapest World Cup ticket is $1,000. After that, I basically cried and was talking with Claude and ChatGPT about this. And basically the conclusion is this. I'm 40 years old. I can't start a family. I have never touched six figures. I've been stuck in retail. I've have a customer service background going 22, 23 years. So it's frustrating. I have two college degrees. I have a lot of certifications. I've done a recent data science certification and intro to IT help desk at WCC, and yet still I can't seem to advance up in the world. So the question is back in 2020 when I started this podcast and all these, ideas down the line to lay a foundation for my umbrella podcast, the question is why haven't I started profiting until this year? And I guess the whole idea is you go on your own timeline, which is fine. But, when somebody says you have your own timeline, it's excusing. So, anyway, just wanted to touch on that. And now let's get going. So, for anyone who is going to be new to this, my name is Benjamin Vabner. I'm a sports enthusiast. I love NFL football, FIFA, UEFA football. I love all the domestic leagues in Europe. I love hockey. I love baseball, basketball, and golf. Basically, a lot of sports. So, throughout this series, you're gonna start to learn, about different sports for me as I have another show, which college football season is coming up, and I'm gonna balance both of them. You're gonna get to learn insights from me. You're gonna get to see my passion for why I love sports so much because when I was younger, it fit a time in my life in which I really needed something to help me cope with some of the things as I got older, and that was sports. And this is for somebody under my podcast umbrella, which is Opinionated Collective and Autism Experience Podcast, which are under the same umbrella. So this is just another series in the arsenal of videos, and stuff that I'm hoping eventually starts getting me noticed and monetizes. So with that in mind, let's divulge into group play of the Champions League. Here's the first part of what we saw. The World Cup has delivered. The atmosphere has been incredible. The teams have been competitive in group play. There have been some major surprises already. Some traditional powers look dominant, like Argentina and Portugal, who this is Cristiano Ronaldo and Leo Messi's final tournament. They're both 39. very shortly and age 41, 1985, 1987. It's also the last tournament for Luka Modric, Harry Kane, very possibly Luka Modric, definitely Harry Kane, and many of the millennial soccer players. We're right now getting to enjoy two top athletes, Cristiano Ronaldo and Leo Messi, who got started in Europe between 2003, 2006, between FC Sporting Lisbon and FC Barcelona. So when both of them got called up, they were called up during a really good generation of players, which was a really good generation of players, which included Thierry Henry, which included the really good Italian team in '06 who beat Zinedine Zidane, who was also a legend of the game, and many other top players. So yesterday was the final six games of the group play, and now we go on to the round of 32. So yesterday, 48 teams finally ended. Now we're down to basically 32 teams. So in yesterday's matches, you had England against Panama, Croatia against Ghana, Colombia against Portugal, DR Congo against Uzbekistan, Jordan against Argentina, and Algeria against Austria. Portugal so far has had a little bit of a so-so, you know, has had a little bit of a so-so group. They get better as the tournament goes deeper, whereas Argentina is 3-0. The big surprise in all this is one of the three major host con is basically the three major host countries come, by the way, and no, this is not a sexual joke. It's an acronym for Canada, Mexico, and United States, Mexico. All three of these teams have performed stellar. The United States under Mauricio Pochettino actually won two games. They did not win the final game, but they still got a point or a goal on the board. And it's been a pleasure to finally watch a very competitive United States team. Normally, the United States gets to the round of 32 and then doesn't actually complete their round of 32 game. Why I think United States fans are excited for this is because Pochettino, who came to this team in like a quarter of the way through 2024, like around the Euros, basically didn't have to qualify with the United States and could basically spend 1.5 of the cycle to this year experimenting with different rosters. The United States fans unfortunately got really pissed off at him, as you could see if you were on Instagram, because a lot of people who hated Pochettino were like, is he going to stay with us long term? What's he doing? We don't have to qualify. Why is he experimenting with all these MLS rosters? So what does he do for the first game of group play? He brings the entire roster of players who have played primarily in Champions League the last year. Players like Bryant McKinney, Christian Pulisic, and basically the entire roster of European-based players between Spain, which is the La Liga. He brought Pulisic and McKinney, who are playing in Italy right now, Serie A. He brought even roster of players with at least one exception from the MLS and then the rest of them from the English Premier League. So the rule with a European coach is ideally he would prefer, even though Pochettino's Argentine, to play top European players actually, because those are the best of the best. They're playing in the best leagues, and yeah. So first of all, the expanded format has created opportunities. The expanded format has created opportunities for countries that normally wouldn't get to this stage, even if it was just for 3 weeks. Traditional powers, the World Cup isn't about reputation, it's about who performs right now. So, although Portugal looks like they're just getting started, they didn't have a good outing in group. Argentina in the last World Cup actually lost their first game against Saudi Arabia, won the next two, won the group, and got out into the round of 32. This time they're 3-0. So we're about to see in the round of 32 in their game do they actually start performing better? Now, let's talk about surprises. Japan showed incredible organization and discipline. Morocco, who went on a Cinderella run all the way to the fourth place game in Qatar in 2022, actually just showed us in this tournament now they're not a joke anymore, or they're not the incredible Cinderella story we thought they were. They're consistent, and that's good for African football, for the continent of Africa. Canada got to compete hard on home soil. Not only that, they did very well. Smaller nations showing the gap between football powers and developing countries keeps shrinking, meaning not all these federations countries have the resources to be investing properly in the football players, and they have to go now get shipped off to Europe. It has been decades since Haiti got to a World Cup, but hey, Haiti at least took advantage of their time. The global game is healthier when more countries believe they can compete. On the other hand, traditional powers have been inconsistent. And you always especially see this with the European, with the European teams in every World Cup first round. Not everyone can consistently make a first round. The usual suspects are almost always coming out of first round. England, France, Portugal, Spain, almost always. Germany always makes it out of group. And that's just, you know, kind of how it goes. We haven't seen Italy since 2014 because the entire generation of players stayed all the way almost until their 40s and then retired, meaning as you started to come down to my generation with players like Giorgio Chiellini, who most recently was in the MLS and now he's retired doing pundit work and, several podcasts and guest appearances. Basically, the millennials generation for Italy wasn't that good. Now, even the generation down, Gen Z for Italy is not performing well as they've basically not qualified for three straight World Cups, and the Federation basically fired their president. So, stock up, stock down. Argentina, you can never count this country out, but I think it'll be interesting to look at Argentina post Messi. In even in 2006, they were able to make it very far. They did so again in 2010. They had Messi then. Uh, and they were coached by Diego Maradona, who's no longer with humanity. They in 2014, they made it all the way to the final four, but they lost and couldn't even get into the. Oh, no, they made it into the final. They made it to the final four and lost to Germany. No, they made the final game and then lost to Germany. Messi had decided to retire from international, but was convinced for the next World Cup cycle when they changed coaches to somebody much younger, Lionel Scaloni, who's also a very close friend of his, who changed tactics, that he was convinced to come back. And Argentina has been better since 2014. They've won Copa Americas, the Centennial Copa America. They won both Copa Americas for both of the next two qualifying cycles. But even in 2018, Argentina didn't really. Argentina made it all the way to the final game again. Only this time they lost to France in 2018, and a very young Kylian Mbappe, along with Anton Griezmann and all their, remaining good players from my generation. Spain, and that's Argentina. Spain, I love the way that Spain controls the game. This new generation is starting to look like my generation of players from Spain, where Spain went on that really good run. France, the depth is ridiculous. I mean, they went from Gen X to millennials who were stocked with good players. Then they merged with Gen Z now, who is even more stocked, and you have not players along with Mbappe from Tushi in Real Madrid to Lilian Thuram's two sons who are playing on France, who got called up. France has quality depth. As I said at the start, the United States this year is a surprise. Pochettino, who's about to likely get an extension, deserves it at this point because what he just did in the first 2 to 3 games shows that United States might have some improvement from even the 2022. Let's see what they do in the round of 32. If they can make it out on home territory in the round of 32, then I think we have something to basically be happy as United States fans. Stock down. Some European giants looked vulnerable in this tournament. For example, Scotland just fired For example, Scotland's manager just stepped down, and Portugal has, even though they got out of group with Cristiano Ronaldo and a lot of new young players under manager Roberto Martinez, we'll see what Portugal does in the round of 32. They can make deep runs, but if you all remember, back to when I was growing up, Portugal before 2002, with that generation, they couldn't make it far. So when Ronaldo got called up, they started going a little further in World Cup tournaments. So when it switched over from Luis Figo to Ronaldo after '06, Portugal started going deep in World Cup and Euro tournaments. And, listen, Ronaldo has proved to us that longevity can be done if you take good care of yourself. Unfortunately, him and Messi playing this long, I don't see this happening again with at least the next 2 generations where these players are going to play to all the way to their 40th birthday unless you're a goalie. If you're a goalkeeper, you can play that long. If you're a defender, you can play to your late 40s. But attacking players, playing all the way into their late 30s was a thing of the past before, unless you played in the Italian league where it wasn't so physical or speed. Now, let's get to the Fox Sports coverage. I've been watching select clips on Instagram. Sometimes I've actually found, more on YouTube in depth. This year they paired Alexi Lalas with CBS Sports' Kate Abdo as sometimes rotating, as well as Thierry Henry and United States pundit Alexi Lalas, who has his own podcast. Honestly, Zlatan and even Javier Chicharito Hernandez, who recently retired, have been the saving gems of this broadcast because honestly, if I had to listen to Alexi Lalas, there's a reason I can tolerate him on a podcast versus him actually knowing what he's talking about when he goes on live television. And even Zlatan Ibrahimovic called it best on the live broadcast. How do you keep getting these jobs? And the reality is because Lawless is, in some sense, he's conservative by nature. He's a registered Republican, as I've seen within the last decade or so. So he knows people at Fox who basically got him in. It's great when you have connections that can get you in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good personality on television. And Zlatan and Thierry Henry bring good personality to the Fox broadcast. The other networks have also started to have some, newer pundits like Gary Neville, Rio Ferdinand, who has his own channel. I've seen, and that's in England. I've also seen Cristiano Ronaldo recently start up his own YouTube channel and become successful with it. Messi has his own studio and will be making content, once his career is over in soccer. But looking at how a player like Zlatan Ibrahimovic got into broadcasting, because the owner of AC Milan, Jerry Cardinelli, who runs a hedge fund, is big in media and probably had the connections for Zlatan as an executive over at AC Milan. So it's just great. And it's also great to see people like Jurgen Klinsmann, who, even though he's a lot older, still brings a lot of balance to whatever broadcast he does for the World Cup. Granted, I don't necessarily like ESPN, but as I said, you need strong opinions from different people who played in top leagues that also played in World Cups as well. So rather than listening to a mid-age Alexi Lalas, I prefer listening to Thierry Henry, Micah Richards on CBS, Jamie Carragher, Kate Obdo, as I'm switching over to them. CBS has changed sports coverage. Champions League has become must-watch television in the last decade. Kate Obdo brings everything and keeps it moving. Thierry Henry is brilliant. Micah and Carragher are great. And that's why on Fox for the World Cup, when you have Zlatan, Javier Hernandez, and Thierry Henry, it just brings for an extra dynamic. These are people who know football. Lawless knows football, but Lawless, unfortunately, is also a little too political sometimes where he needs to be, and that's not what these broadcasts need. You need people who are entertaining, had big personalities back in their playing days. ESPN and the global perspective. ESPN has always brought up international perspective. Their analysts understand world football differently. The conversations often feel more tactical and analytical. I appreciate the balance. Different networks bring different strengths. Fox focuses on spectacle. CBS focuses on chemistry and entertainment. Hence, when you watch the Champions League broadcast, there's always dynamic joking between TT, Carragher, Micah Richards, and Kate Obdo. It's like watching two big brothers with the little brother and the big sister who just happens, two of them happen to be millennials, the other two happen to be Gen X, but it's interesting watching that chemistry and dynamic. ESPN brings more global context. So I remember back in 2006 when I was watching the World Cup, they brought a lot of older analysts and TV people like Jurgen Klinsmann who had been playing all the way back to the early 90s and the 80s with that type of knowledge. So ESPN was able to make that broadcast as a kid, far more enjoyable to watch. And that's true even when I was watching the NFL, the MLB, the NBA. It was always fun watching, much older perspectives. As fans, we're lucky to have multiple perspective. The funniest legends of the game. As I hinted in the other segment, Carragher is just funny as hell. Thierry Henry manages to both be incredibly serious and incredibly funny at the same time. Roy Keane, who played in the early 2000s and the 90s, he's an interesting person himself. He's unintentionally funny human being who just brings up sarcastic moments even when he partners with Rio Ferdinand, who was a great Manchester United player. Let's be honest about something. Micah, I don't know. I don't know why we didn't hear from you all the way back during your playing days as much, but when you got on TV, you brought the funny dynamic. The roasts with Kate are just frigging hilarious, and I can't sometimes, especially with you. Now, knockout stage. The thing that we all hope is going to turn out good. Okay, looking ahead, Argentina, France, and Spain, and maybe England are among the favorites. Do not sleep on the United States. I believe Pochettino is going to actually motivate them. And in my belief, I think the United States has at least potential to go from the round of 32 to the final 16 to the final eight. And it's stretching it to say final four, but I think because it's home soil and the team is playing lightning right now, don't sleep on them. Morocco, Croatia. These two teams will definitely go deep like they did in the last tournament. So look for all of them to get to the end. But if I had to look at who I think is going to be in the final four, Argentina, France, Spain, maybe England, depending on Harry Kane, who's in his final tournament. Maybe. And then my prediction for the final, I would not sleep on Portugal. I would I would like to say Portugal can go to the Final Four, but that's contingent on how the team plays with Ronaldo now because everyone is a lot younger, and even in my generation, you're at the end of my generation with Bruno Fernandes, and a few other friends of his on the team. The keeper has to get as many clean sheets as he can towards the end. And we haven't always seen Roberto Martinez deep in a tournament because we only saw Roberto Martinez win the UEFA Nations League last year to qualify for the Cup. We saw him win the Euros with Ronaldo. So he's good at managing the team, but the team has to feed Ronaldo. And Ronaldo, who just basically last week was going toe to toe with Joe Neves, they will all have to get along now for the next, for a deep tournament run. So we will see if that Simpsons prediction of also, you know, the COME acronym, Canada, United States, Mexico, can also go deep in this. Don't sleep on them because even the Simpsons back in the 90s predicted Portugal and Mexico to be in the final. So there's that potential, but in the next episode, we're going to look more at, how the round of 32 progresses, who advances, and then we'll start looking at Argentina, Portugal, and the United States path. So I hope you enjoyed the reactions, the content, and everything that I put together. I'll leave you with a couple questions. So, because when I post this to LinkedIn, I'm going to definitely want some feedback. Let me know who impressed you? Who was the biggest disappointment? Which broadcast do you prefer? Do you prefer ESPN, CBS, or Fox? Who is the funniest football legend on television right now? Thanks for supporting my umbrella opinionated collective, which also includes Autism Experience Podcast, this, and what I'm going to start posting my college football videos from the last two seasons with Justin. We might mix Justin into this. We might mix my friend Aaron Catter into this, who's a co-founder. So we'll definitely, continue the fun at the next recording. Hope you guys have a good week and see you at the next one.